So here we're back here at the Shacknews Awards deliberations. We're gonna talk the best. This is a new category for the Shacknews Awards because we didn't have enough to write about. Apparently, we have decided to add another award. We're calling it the best remake of 2020 because everything's a remake now, right?
Yeah, we're out of ideas. We've reached our limit of ideas.
We're at the postmodern endpoint of video games. Can't wait for the Adventures of Lolo remake.
I don't know. I think that they still they stand better than film because, for example, like Mafia 3, Josh. Like I've never played Mafia 3, but I played the definitive edition and I really enjoyed it. It gave me a chance to experience the same game, just much more visually impressive for someone who's never played a Mafia game. You know what I mean? Like it's the same game. When they remake a Batman movie or whatever, it's not the same movie. It's a completely different experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a new take from a new director and a new writer.
So I think with games it works a little better, especially like.
I think they have. It depends, though. I think David's going to touch on this, but it's a philosophical thing that a studio has when remaking a game. And
so
I think
that's what we need. I think we should set some criteria since this is a new category. Also, do you want to define what we consider to be a remake versus a remaster? Like a game has to be rebuilt, not just given a coat of paint.
Remaster is something closer to like Pikmin 3 Deluxe.
Yeah,
it's very good, but it's a remaster.
Also, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Super Mario, basically any of that Wii U shovel port shit that Nintendo does. That's a remaster. But Link's Awakening last year, that was a remake.
That's a remake.
I think that's a good way to describe it. So we had some really good ones this year. We have Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Outstanding.
We have Demon Souls Remake. And we have RE3 Make. Or
Holy crap, this is quite a category.
R3 Make. Right? I can't remember what we called it. But yeah. We have Mafia Definitive Edition. That's what it's called, right, Josh?
Yep.
And then we have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2. Sorry.
So that's a remake of Tony Hawk 3 then, because
1+2 is 3, and 3 is the best Tony Hawk. So guess what? 1+2 might be the best Tony Hawk ever made.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just saying, like, I have not had as much fun playing a video game in 2020 than playing Tony Hawk. And you're talking about coming from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which might be the worst video game ever made. It's the lowest reviewed score on Shacknews.com. Lower than any other game ever. So to go from
our only one, I believe.
Yes, the only one we've ever given out. To go from that to this, wow, just amazing, and tremendous work done by Vicarious Visions on this. They did make some changes to it, and I think that why it won't be my best remake is one of the major changes: the bail mechanic. When you fall in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, you don't ragdoll and fly around as much as you did in the originals. There's this pixelated rewind sound effect that comes up. You jump back on your board faster. So I think that this was really a design decision on the part of the studio, and it changes the game, right? So sometimes a remake changes the game for the better, sometimes they change it for the worse. In this case, I think it's worse.
The ragdolling bales were part of the fun.
Some of the funniest stuff that ever happens in that game is when you go flying off of a ramp and then you smash your head into something.
So how far can you fly,
Yeah. So to remove that was kind of lame. But from being able to chain together combos or get points faster, it is an improvement. I understand why they did it, but to me it takes away from the game. Outside of that, the soundtrack's awesome. They did do something else, and I mentioned this in my review. When you get your special meter up, there's this reverb sound effect that goes over the music. So the music sounds different when you're about to land a cool trick, and that kind of breaks immersion. These are design decisions that didn't need to be done, But everywhere that they needed to have that attention to detail, they nailed it. Ollieing the magic bomb on Venice, or the hangar, the warehouse. Like they recreated so many things. They had a reverence for this series that's just really impressive. The hangar at the beginning of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, the remake version of it, there's these giant banners in there for each game. It's like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and like Neversoft logos. They didn't need to put Neversoft logos in their game. It's a Vicarious Visions game. But yeah, I thought it did an excellent job. It's not going to win this award, but I love it. It's my favorite remake of the year.
Which Tony Hawk had Warehouse in him? Is that 1 or 2?
1.
Yeah, I remember that game. Everyone talked about it, and I was never into skating, but it was a game. I played a lot of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 just because it was a fun arcade-like game. And I wasn't a big skater.
No, that's I think what was amazing about the game at the time was that it brought skating to the mainstream. And there had been moments like that in the past, like Skate or Die did that, or TNC Surf and Skate did that, but nothing was like when Tony Hawk came out. And at the same time, Tony Hawk had just landed his 900 trick for the first time. So skating and the X Games were really popping off at the same time. So it was truly a magical time for skateboarding and spreading it across the world. But,
how WWF No Mercy is still the gold standard of wrestling games for me? Tony Hawk is still the gold standard of skating games for me. Nothing's really touched it since, and that's no disrespect the skate games, but it's still Tony Hawk for me. I don't get that arcade rush the way that I do in those games. And even like we were saying with Pro Skater 5, even the Tony Hawk franchise itself hasn't touched that magic again since.
No. For me, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 is my favorite of the series. And a lot of that has to do with level design, sure, but it had to do with the revert mechanic, which was added in 3. They took the mechanics from 3 and put them in 1 and 2, and it's so fucking good. You can chain together combos like you were never able to before. So once again, it's definitely a different game than the original. And some of the level design doesn't translate well. Warehouse, for instance, Greg, it does not translate well to the revert mechanic, because the revert is you can go off of a vert, hit the revert, go into a manual, and keep your combo going. They really started designing levels with manuals in mind, which is when you kind of are on 2 wheels, in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. So that first half of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, it's a bit odd, because you're new mechanics, old levels. But they do have a toggle, so if you want to play with the old mechanics, you can. They really thought everything in that. I just wish the multiplayer was a little bit better. But yeah, we can move on since then you're gonna vote for it.
It's not that we don't want to vote for it, but
version.
Wait, what did you say, Krebs?
I really enjoyed the PC version. It got a really outstanding port when I expected Activision to really bung it up as they normally do there. It all ran smooth, looked good, had great HDR, perfect high frame rate support, and that the game physics actually changed with the frame rate instead of it being locked at a lower frame rate physics and input. And when the frame rate or when the refresh rate goes up, the input lag continues to drop linearly. So the nicer you can run it, the easier it is to do tricks, and the controls feel better, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, it's I had to review it on PS4, and when I have an Epic Game Store account. When it came out, I got it on Epic Game Store, and I won't go back to console for it. It's so much better on PC because of what you're saying.
I think it's up against such stiff competition this year.
Oh,
and
totally.
I think,
Yeah.
And Sam and David can speak to Demon's Souls just as an example. I mean, just the field of Remake is just so stacked this year.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, let's be real though. Final Fantasy VII Remake, man. I think it's
incredible.
Yeah, you can't deny. It's one of the most beautiful games ever made. Put a period on that. Ever. It's freaking gorgeous.
And
it's absolutely gorgeous.
The vistas that you see towards the end of the game as you're making your way to the Shinra building and you just look out and see like the way everything's rendered, it's just like, holy crap, that's a painting right there.
Yeah, I've seen some textures in that game that are embarrassing.
Yeah,
They're
they're doors. They're doors.
Thing, yeah.
There's like plenty of areas. Yes, the character models are beautiful. Their hair looks really nice. But man, you can't tell me that that's the best graphics.
It doesn't look as good as 15.
Yeah,
that's what I was actually going to say. Is that the reason why I won't fight for Final Fantasy VII is that it's basically Final Fantasy 15 in a Final Fantasy VII skin to me. But and that's not a bad thing, because I do believe that Final Fantasy VII has a lot of iconic things that were important for the series, and it's really cool to see those characters like repackaged in this style. But Final Fantasy VII is probably something that I'll return to and be more interested in when they get to the second part, because the best part about Final Fantasy 15 is missing in Final Fantasy 7 to me, and that's the open world exploration. I love the open world in Final Fantasy 15, and I hate being confined to corridors in Final Fantasy 7.
Although I will say that none outside of the sewers, which we can all agree is the low point of the game, outside of maybe the ending, none of the areas in like Final Fantasy 7 really outstay their welcome. Like there's so much variety in like the environments and everything you explore, and I really loved it for that as well.
that's the benefit to being more linear. You know, is that once you're done with that area, you're moving on to the next thing.
I think that I see where TJ is coming from, and I'm only about, I think, 4 or 5 hours into it. I think one thing that Final Fantasy VII Remake does particularly well, and a good reason why it doesn't move into the open world, is it really gives you that claustrophobic feeling of being kind of at the bottom of the food chain. Especially when you're in the slums and you get that apartment from Tifa's friend, like you just kind of feel like you're in a little box. I feel like the move to open world in part 2 will be that much more revelatory. The characters will kind of get to experience what we'll get to experience, finally like kind of stretching our wings and exploring. That's really working for me. I don't really know if this carries any weight, but that first chapter is one of the best opening segments in a game I've ever played. I thought it's so intense. The music, the orchestrated score is just goosebumps the whole time.
It does an amazing job of like if you've never played the game, it does an amazing job of introducing the characters, introducing the story, making you understand why you care about these people.
Yeah, JRPGs for me are usually really exposition heavy, which is why, like, in a lot of ways, they didn't really evolve past the 16-bit days. Final Fantasy VII is just in media res the whole time. You feel like you're jumping right into the middle of the action. You instantly get a really good idea of the dynamic and the dichotomy between Cloud, this mercenary who's clearly only in it for the money at first, and that will probably change as things go on, versus someone like Barrett and the rest of the group who really believe in what they're doing, even though they are eco-terrorists, are still terrorists, and that'll catch up to them. It was just like, as someone who really hasn't delved much into JRPGs in a long time, I am really, really digging that game. It shot right up from not even on my radar to in my top 5, maybe top 3, like right away. It's really, really fucking good.
Yeah, it's an excellent game.
And I will say that I recorded this earlier this year, but as somebody who didn't understand what the fuss was about with Cloud, after playing this game, I get it now. Like, the way they introduced him, the way he progresses through the game, I understand why people are so into Cloud and why he's such a great character. And I've just, the characterizations for everybody, including Barrett and Aerith and everybody else, like, God, that game is just incredible in introducing everybody and establishing who they are and what their motivations are, and I appreciate all of it.
Yeah, I made this comment earlier, in November, about I do hope they continue to make these remakes and continue to improve upon it and all that stuff, because eventually, on a long enough timeline, they'll get to Final Fantasy IX Remake, aka the good one.
Wow. Whoa, shots fired.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I really completely agree with what Ozzy said. I like Cloud, I like Aerith, I like Barrett. I also like Jesse. I did some reading. Like, I was having so much fun, I actually went back, like, okay, what are the changes that clearly I'm not seeing because I never played the original?
Sure.
And it feels like all the characters you meet are just so much more fleshed out. They're interesting. They're fun to interact with. They're fun to party with. Also, so this gets into some philosophy for me of what a remake can be versus what it should be. Both Square and Capcom have done a fantastic job over the past 2 years of kind of transplanting the spirit of an original game into a new shell. I think the example in Final Fantasy VII for me is the combat system. One of the reasons I stuck with JRPGs for so long is I really liked the strategy in turn-based systems. And so that's the one thing I was kind of leery about. In fact, I think sometimes the combat goes on a little too long in Final Fantasy VII for me. I get a little burned out. But what I really like is the blend of real-time and turn-based, and how you still feel that little bit of pressure when you pull up the command menu. Things are still moving, just slower. And so you feel just enough of an impetus to kind of make a decision. But you can still, real-time combat has always been more mainstream. And so I feel like that definitely made the game more accessible and palatable for me, but I'm also sucked into everything I can do from the command menu and figuring out who's going to do what, swapping characters while, Cloud recharges his abilities. I can play as Barrett or whoever. I just really, really got into the combat, and I think Square did a great job of reimagining.
I think it's the best gameplay mechanics in a Final Fantasy game ever.
It's a good combination of modern, sort of active hack and slash RPG combat with the HEB system.
Yeah.
That is something I really missed from the series. So having this sort of hybrid system, it gave me the sense that I was playing an old Final Fantasy while still keeping me constantly engaged in the battle instead of just sort of waiting for something to happen.
I think that takes a lot of. It's really hard to stick that landing. Resident Evil 2 and 3 kind of made me feel the same thing. I got the spirit of the original games, but I also appreciated that they were wrapped in a modern shell. Unless there's anything more to say about Final Fantasy, I can get into.
Yeah, let's start talking about Resident Evil 3.
I would just say that Final Fantasy has a lot, just so many different situations happen in that game, and the gameplay is constantly good.
Yeah,
when you have to dance, it's fun. When you have to get a dress, it's fun. You have to even
that was one of my favorite scenes in the game this year. Jesse's one of my favorite characters in that game.
Jesse has a backstory. She didn't have a backstory.
All those characters' backstories.
Yeah.
No, all three of those characters are fantastic, and you feel it.
Yeah.
You feel for those characters. I was very concerned at several times for several people in that story.
But that's where they took it. We can move on to the next game after this, but to me, that's where they took this game to a whole new level from the original, where they actually did add to it. Instead of being by the book, we're gonna remake this. They took some artistic license, and everywhere that they made that choice, it worked. And to David's point, that doesn't always work. And I think they definitely deserve credit for that.
None of those characters felt expendable by the end. You didn't want to see anything bad happen to any of them, except for maybe Chadley.
Fuck Chadley. Why did they add Chadley? I hate that guy.
I have to ask, is the Final Fantasy VII remake the Final Fantasy VII in its entirety?
No.
Or is it just part one? So
it is just part one.
I think it's not a third of it.
It feels like a complete game.
Isn't it the first 7 hours of the original game spread out across 40 hours?
Yes.
It's kind of amazing when you think
they added a lot more content, is my understanding. There's a lot of content of 7R that was not there in the original.
Yes.
Right. And so when the next part comes out, you'll be having to buy that one as well. It's not added to Final Fantasy.
Correct.
Okay.
It's going to cost $180 to play Final Fantasy VII.
Remake Part 2.
No,
the whole saga.
I think it's 3 parts, right?
Right.
3 or 4 parts, I guess. Yeah.
I will say, if Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 were episodic, where every chapter was an episode, I would buy every chapter and still feel like I got my money's worth. Like I'm just really enjoying it.
There's a lot of meat to that game. It's not just like a cheap $60 4-hour adventure and you
No.
have to buy it.
No.
It's a big...
And that's what's really impressive is that they took a third of the game, if not less, and they made it a full game.
Yeah.
And that's really damn impressive. But at the same time, it kind of sucks to Sam's point because you have to spend more money to play the whole experience.
Yeah.
You're spending that over probably, 10 years, though? Like,
Yeah, this is going to take forever. Especially because the way they released it. They released Final Fantasy VII Remake at the end of a console cycle. So you got to think that the next one's coming out on next gen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could
definitely.
take even longer.
Well, I mean, if it's going to take another 7 years to make part 2, we're going to be looking at the PS6 by then.
I'm gonna. Some other.
They warned us from the beginning. They said if we ever remake Final Fantasy VII, it will take longer than the entire Final Fantasy 13 trilogy combined.
Here's a weird thought. Some of us will be close to retirement age by the time this trilogy wraps up.
No one's
I felt that
retiring.
way.
No
Blake.
one's
I
gonna
felt that way
retire
about
in the
Kingdom
United
Hearts.
States, Blake. We missed the bandwagon.
Nobody's talking about retiring.
Game out.
I said that
I know.
same thing.
I
about-
know it's just a term. Retirement age. I know. We're all just gonna die on our feet.
There's no
I
social
get that.
security.
As
Yeah,
a Kingdom
no, I
Hearts fan, I'm
understand
used to that.
You
I
wanna
know what I'm getting into.
Do you want to play a good JRPG that is a complete story that you won't have to pay $180 for? Then might I suggest fellow Square Enix RPG, Trials of Mana. Which
Oh,
is
I
also
forgot
good.
about that one. That was a good one too.
That's not
That
a remake.
game
It's
is
though.
also that's a
It is
No,
remake.
no, it's a remake.
It is?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
It's a remake of Secret of Mana 3, which never came out in the United States except for like in
Oh.
fan
And they
translations.
completely modernized it. Asif, you read my review. I said at the end of it, I'm like, any other year, it would be the best remake of the year. Instead, it's not even the best remake to come out this month.
Putting that
From the
game
same company.
out-
I do
Putting
remember
that game
that.
out directly alongside Final Fantasy VII Remake was a crime.
Yeah, why'd they do that to themselves?
Why did they do that?
Because
Oh, it's
if
because
it
Final
hadn't
Fantasy
come-
was delayed, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's because Final Fantasy VII is a PS4 exclusive. Trials of Mana is multi-platform.
Yeah.
You can play that on PC and Switch.
Yeah,
Okay.
and like that sucks so much because if it hadn't come out like that, I absolutely would have played the heck out of that game and like,
Completely
probably
cannibalized it.
argued for,
You know what
and
else sucks so
probably
much,
argued for it.
TJ?
What's that?
Demon Souls. Nah, I'm kidding.
Right. No.
Oh,
Wait a minute. We haven't given. I don't think we gave David enough time to really reflect on Resident Evil.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like I said earlier, I think Square and Capcom are the best in the business regarding remakes right now. Capcom really gets my vote because they've been doing this better than anyone else since 2002 when they remade Resident Evil 1 on GameCube, which is still one of the best games they've ever made. So one of the reasons the original Resident Evil 3 didn't really click for a lot of people was because 2 was like the apogee, the crescendo of those original games. 3 came out like 15 to 18 months later, and it was about the time the formula started to run dry a little bit. The timeline was confusing. Nemesis was really cool, but the PS1 was showing its age by that time. And also that game, just a little bit of trivia, wasn't originally Resident Evil 3. It was a spin-off game. Code Veronica was RE3, but shit happened and they just kind of like shoehorned the number 3 onto Nemesis. And I was a little worried about that because the same thing kind of happened here, where last January RE2 came out, and then this year, 15 months later, even less time, RE3 came out. So Mr. X especially was so well done in last year's RE2 that I wondered if Nemesis would, kind of have his lunch eaten. And that wasn't the case at all. I actually feel that as a complete package, RE3's remake is better than RE2, even though I liked RE2's story and characters better. The reason is one area where RE2 dropped the ball for me as a huge fan. I mentioned this game a few times in the lead up to its release on Shacknews. Is the B scenarios, which are now known as Second Run for Leon and Claire, were basically the same as their A scenarios. You enter the police station from a different location. Mr. X is in play in that first segment, so it's a little harder, but from there, you're just repeating the scenario you already played, which I thought was kind of a shame. There's really very little replay value in RE2. RE3 gives you dozens of unlockable items, unlockable difficulty modes, all of which make the game super fun to keep playing. If I hadn't gotten busy with long reads and a couple other projects this year, I mean, I put 60 hours into RE3, which I think is pretty good for just the single player portion of the game. So as far as replay value, like RE3 Remake for me is up there with RE4 and 5. You know, you can go back and play those games, upgrade the weapons, deck them out. RE3 isn't quite that versatile, but in terms of the amount of stuff you can unlock to keep playing, it makes a really, really compelling argument for having you know, one of the best replay values in the franchise. On top of that, and I remember TJ and I talking about this at last year's Game of the Year Awards, we were worried that, you know, Resident Evil Resistance seemed kind of cool, but if it was released as a standalone $60 game, it probably would get kind of pooped on, because standalone Resident Evil multiplayer games have not exactly fared well over the franchise's history. This is a really fun, completely free multiplayer mode that a lot of people never even touch, which is kind of a shame because it's really good. And I think if there's one thing most Resident Evil games miss, sometimes for the better, it's multiplayer, which is actually why I argued to give RE3 a 10 out of 10. Which didn't happen. It got a 9, which is fine. I think I agree with that score. I think it's great. But as a package on its own, Resident Evil 3 Remake, I think, makes a really great argument as being arguably the tightest Resident Evil, classic-style Resident Evil package ever made. As far as philosophical changes, again, I was really concerned that Nemesis would be kind of an also-ran following Mr. X last year, but I really thought they did a great job with him. He doesn't stalk you as long in this campaign as he did in the original. And I think that's because if he had, I guarantee you most people would have said, oh, well, he's just like Mr. X, except he can run and shoot rockets at you. I remember the first time, you know, when you go into a safe room in RE2 Remake, Mr. X kind of forgets that he just saw that and wanders off. Nemesis will just stare at you until you come out. Like, he may as well just be cracking his knuckles, like, I've got all day. And it's really just a cool fucking visual to see him like swing Batman style, Spider-Man style over the rooftops, drop right in front of you, hit the ground, slide back, and then charge at you. It's just a really cool visual. I also thought that this remake did a great job of telling the story of Jill and Nemesis, two main characters who each became more powerful over the course of the game, but their reason for wanting to survive made Jill always have the upper hand. She wasn't looking to just improve technologically. She wanted to grow as a person. She stopped and helped people. The narrative actually in this game, surprisingly again, is really solid, because Resident Evil to me has traditionally always been a really good popcorn game, which is almost as fun to laugh at as it is to experience. I thought the voice acting was solid. I thought Carlos was used well. I know a lot of fans, and this is where we get into more of the philosophy of a remake, there were fans who were upset because they cut the clock tower segment from the original RE3 and the earthworm fight. Like, if you really want giant worms, I guess this pissed you off that there wasn't one in RE3
that
Remake.
boss fight sucked anyway.
Yeah, it totally sucked.
It was so bad, and it also, again, it took the focus off of Jill and Nemesis. The story is all about them the whole time, the whole game. They're both evolving, but you know one is going to have the edge because of the motivation. She's not just an automaton who's designed to kill. I loved this game. If a certain other game had not completely come out of nowhere this year, it would easily be my game of the year. Donovan, if you want to stab me in the back this year, you can. I won't even get
no.
It's totally good.
I'm not stabbing in the back. I really liked RE3, and obviously if you watched our deliberations last year, you know how the whole RE2 thing went down. But I love that game as well. And I played RE3 early this year when it came out, and you brought up a point about Nemesis, how he kind of had to evolve from Mr. X to avoid those comparisons, which is what I went into it thinking, because I never played the original either of those games. I was like, okay, so he's like Mr. X but like on steroids. And I remember the first time I was running from him, and I like fled into one of like the safe house rooms, and I waited for him to do the thing in Mr. X there where he would just keep going or stomp away. I hear his footsteps leave, and I look back and he's just waiting at the door, and that like
standing there.
That oh shit moment of, oh, he's not going anywhere. It was one of my most like, I guess like terrifying or scary moments in the game this year. But I really dug it.
I will say that I will say one thing that David said that really sold me on this is that he went into Resident Evil 2 last year having loved the original. He did not love the original Resident Evil 3. You did not like the original, and you like this better than the Resident Evil 2 remake.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, even Asif was like, do you want to review this? And I was like, I guess. I'm not even really excited about it. Like, I knew they were working on it. In fact, actually, for whatever this is worth, Capcom did not do this. They farmed it out to the studio that is right now working on the remake of Resident Evil 4. But yeah, I went into this like, this is actually like my, I don't know, 7th favorite Resident Evil game. And I was just completely surprised at every turn. I've replayed this so many times, whereas I did speedruns of RE2 just because I enjoyed it. But I eventually burned out on the campaign because it's the same every time. In RE3, depending on what you unlock, you can have a very different, very unique experience each time. I also thought the another mechanic from the original game that made the jump was I don't remember the technical term, but it's like the quick dodge, where depending on your timing of the dodge, you'll automatically turn and aim at the enemy's weak spot, which is actually pretty cool if you don't know like a certain boss's weak spot. The game basically rewards you for successfully dodging by saying like, hey, shoot right there. Yeah, you got it. And I thought that was a really, really slick implementation. I just think everything this game did was super great. And it's, to me, what a remake should be. You don't have to make a carbon copy of the original, which will come up in this discussion later. You can take the opportunity to say, you know what, this was maybe a misstep. Let's do this differently. Or we liked this. Let's lean into this. I think it's one of the best games of the year.
Yeah, like I've had people try to argue to me that because of the shortness of this experience and the fact that they cut out mercenaries, it loses something. And I was like, that's nonsense. That's a nonsense argument. Because the things that they did improve upon it, for one, I like that it's a short experience because I have so little free time to play games in my life. And I like that Resident Evil 3 says what it has to say, delivers it impactfully, and then stops wasting my time.
Yeah, and it was very important because, again, one of the reasons the series started to falter was RE3 was too similar to 2 and got compared to 2. For this remake, Capcom kind of said, okay, let's not make this game super long because 2 was pretty long. So let's actually have this really tight, really focused. There's this misconception in gaming, and this goes outside of remakes, that longer equals better, and I just don't agree with that. I agree with TJ, and the other thing is, like, I don't think RE3 would be as replayable, even factoring in all the unlockables and secret difficulty modes, if it were as long. Half the fun of the challenge is beat it again, get more points, unlock more stuff, play again. And that's what I did. I beat it 4 or 5 times on PS4 and on PC. I was just having so much fun.
Yeah. Like, it's not bloated. And, like, I'm going to put this out there. I haven't played around too much in Mercenaries mode on the other games, not because I don't find the idea interesting. That's not why I'm there for Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Like the Mercenaries mode is a fun challenge, but it is antithetical to me of the drama and like action the drama, action, and narrative and campiness that is associated with Resident Evil.
Yeah, I think that's true. I know a lot of one strike against it for other people was that, oh, it's got too much action. I don't know if they didn't play the original RE3.
Yeah, you don't play the third one?
Yeah, every new game in that series had more action than the one before it. Even in the original RE2, Capcom arranged zombies in certain rooms where they were made to just blow them all up at once with either Leon's shotgun or Claire's bowgun. Like, every game escalated the action because you have to, because again, RE2 was much more of a, not completely pure, but a more pure survival horror game. RE3 was always about adding more action to the horror, which is, the direction they steered into for RE4, which I think they did well, but I know that game was also controversial. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a couple of years, but...
So, as a huge Resident Evil fan, probably on par with David, I will say that. Like, I just started to play RE3, and I am enjoying it, but... Like, I know, like you said, the Mr. X comment, like, oh, it's just a copy of Mr. X, but, like, that would have been cool, because he's having that threat linger there. I mean, even in the original game, having to go through an area knowing Nemesis was there because I didn't shoot him, or like not knowing if he'd be there or not, was like part of a great gaming experience. And this one, he doesn't do it nearly as often. And it would have been great for him to chase me around the city and have me go, shit, I have to go through there, and he's there. Like, it's those moments that I loved about the original 2 and the remake. Like, oh god, Mr. X is walking around the police station. It's a terrifying experience, and I wish they would have done that for 3.
So
even though it would have been a copy of Mr. X, you know, it still would have been.
Sure, I get that. I think the thing is, like, you kind of went into this knowing what to expect because you edited my videos for the
This is true.
The first time I played it, the first time you play a story-based game is very unique because every time you replay it, you're not really playing for the story. You know what's coming. The first time I played it, I thought Nemesis would be there the whole time. And really, I think that's what horror does well, is the unknown. Is he going to pop out? Is he going to be around the corner? Is he not? That really takes you on a ride the first time you play. The other thing is, the original RE3 kind of had a flaw. The fact that Nemesis was around more means if you go watch speedrunners play that game, there are so many ways to glitch him. And if you can glitch Nemesis, he's not scary anymore. He's just another zombie, but one that takes a few more shotgun shells. This game has fewer opportunities to glitch him. He only appears in areas where he has a lot of room to showcase his entire repertoire. And that means that every second he is out is that much more of a heart-racing experience.
But the times he shows up in the remake, it's all kind of not completely scripted, but it's a lot less freeform. The times, you know, that it appears, or at least when I went through it, it all felt like it was designed to be exactly that way. I didn't feel like he was freely floating around levels or anything. It was always, oh, he was supposed to show up right here no matter what.
The thing is, so I think that's a valid point too. I did speedruns of this game for a while, and I actually had to adapt a few times because Nemesis does change his behavior in small ways. Although again, I think you're mostly right. His appearances in the original weren't organic either, though. He could always he didn't roam because the PlayStation didn't have memory to have him roam. If you were in a certain area and he could enter that area, sometimes he'd be there, sometimes he wouldn't. In fact, it was pretty easy to lose him. You could do the same thing you could do in the RE2 remake. In the original RE3, if you went into a save room and waited for like 30 seconds, Nemesis music would fade out because the game just kind of pooped him out of memory, and then you could leave. Again, he was just so much easier to divert. So for me anyway, the less is more approach really worked here.
The other thing I want to bring up, I don't have a gavel, but I want to call objection the conversation you guys were having earlier about the people that had gripes about the game being short should be tossed out because the part 2 was long. I played part 2 without having, or the remake of 2 here for the site pre-release for our stream, going in totally blind, not knowing anything, not having played the 98 one. And I finished the first playthrough, working my way through in under 7 hours. And I don't consider that to be long, especially going totally cold. So I don't know the idea that, you know, or the argument.
I'm at an age where like a short game doesn't count against
I'm not
it.
saying that short games are bad itself, but I guess it was more the argument that Resident Evil 3 is not really short because Resident Evil 2 was long, and that's kind of not really a real argument.
Yeah, that's fair.
What it comes down to is like it's a backhanded compliment, right? Because you want more of something that you're enjoying, so if it's short, you're disappointed, right? So that's just
you always want to be left wanting more, but the idea that the second remake was long is kind of laughable. Unless you're willing to run through it 15 times. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people get a lot of value out of that, not to discount all that.
Oh, no, for sure. And I can agree with what you're saying. I think one reason RE3 is inherently shorter, and it always was, is because there's one character rather than two. And that one character has one scenario rather than two, multiplied by 2 for a total of 4 in RE2.
You have Carlos.
There's also a half-baked.
But you're talking about the scenario A and B, though, like the two different viewpoints. Yeah, they don't have that, so yeah.
They don't, and really, like RE2's remake last year, you know, wasn't especially long either, but it felt longer because you had those additional campaigns that were really like 20% new and then 80%.
Yeah, they weren't that different.
And I think one reason this is shorter is because, again, the replayability favors that. I don't know if that argument works better for you, but they want you to beat the game faster so that you can unlock more stuff and play it again and have a different experience. The weapons this time, it's not just like, oh, shotgun, biggest shotgun. The electric pulse rifle, for example, completely changes the way you approach a lot of enemies because it doesn't work as well against some rather than others. I was thinking of taking the easy way out and just grabbing the rocket launcher right off the bat, saving up a ton of points for it. But the rocket launcher, particularly the final boss in RE3, is made such that you can't just point a rocket at it and fire to win. That doesn't work. You actually have to go through cycles. The rocket launcher isn't an easy button. So I really liked, again, the unlockables. I also liked the coins, which I guess were in RE7, which I never finished, where you can, like, you know, increase your health regen, your strength, your defense. For me, it being shorter worked because this game always was shorter, but also they kind of incentivize jumping back in with the new stuff you just unlocked. But that's just what worked for me.
Fun bit of trivia, that coin thing actually comes from Resident Evil Outbreak. One of the characters has a coin item where he flips it, and if it's heads, it doubles his attack power, and if it's tails, he loses all his bonuses.
That's kind of cool. I would like to see them go back to something like that in a future game.
So one of the things you liked about RE3 was that they removed a crappy boss battle.
Yeah.
I know a game that could probably remove a crappy boss battle. There's one on this list. Have you heard of this man-eater boss battle in Demon Souls?
Oh my god.
Oh, Demon Souls.
Because that should have been fixed.
Wait, whoa. Last I heard, you couldn't beat the first boss. So
I haven't, but I've read. I'm a Shacknews moderator. I read threads.
So, to jump ahead a little bit here, I think Man-Eater was atrocious in the original. In the remake, because of the frame rate, he's so much more fun. He might be one of my favorite boss encounters in the game, especially if you use headphones and you turn on that 3D audio stuff. Like that, the first time I fought him, and it was like 10 minutes or so, which is pretty long for a Souls game, I had an absolute blast. But in the original, he was bad. It just goes to show that, I don't know, there's some history there. Demon Souls was actually...
It goes to show that slow, crappy running console games are no fun for anybody.
Yeah, and one of the reasons Demon Souls was slow and ran poorly was actually that game was on fire. So Demon Souls Remake is kind of a redemption story for Sony. When that game started, Sony played an early version and they hated it. They thought it was too hard. They thought it was too glitchy. So they actually pulled Hidetaka Miyazaki, who was just a senior programmer on their Armored Core games at the time, and said, do what you can with this. We need Sony's money. And he salvaged Demon Souls. And that game is very flawed, but it also, that game is to Wolfenstein 3D what Dark Souls is to Doom. It was this important first step, this important precursor. And it also, even Miyazaki said in interviews, they said, what are you going to do next? Will it be like Demon Souls? And he said, I consider this game a successful experiment, and I think what we will do will be a lot better. And he was right. But I think that, I don't want to dominate the conversation here. I have more to say, but I'll turn it over to someone else. I think that Blue Point is kind of at the opposite end of the philosophical spectrum. Their game is a remake. Resident Evil 3 and Final Fantasy 7 are reimaginings. And we're getting, you know, I don't mean to quibble over definitions, but the definition of a remake has expanded drastically because of what Blue Point, Square, and Capcom have done this year. Blue Point's philosophy is there is a reason someone's going to pay us to make a game. It's not because it's trash, it's because it is beloved. So we're going to take that game and we're going to kind of polish it up, and we're going to leave intact, for better or worse, all the things that made it this classic experience. Yeah, and for what it's worth, as someone who's played these games since day one, there are a ton of quality of life improvements in the Demon Souls remake that don't get near enough attention because everyone still likes to complain about how it's glitchy. I've done level skips, area skips that work exactly as they did in the original. And so I think there's merit to that approach. But yes, there are still a lot of rough edges that I wish would have been sanded down, but I've still taken 2 characters through this game. It's still the game I want to be playing, even as I'm playing all these other awesome games, because Demon Souls is very special to me and special to a lot of people. I think Blue Point did a really cool thing. Would I have liked to see something more along the lines of RE2 and 3 and FF7? Yes, but that's not what Blue Point does, and I'm fine with that.
I'd like to add that Blue Point's Demon Souls is, I think, objectively the most polished PlayStation 5 game. I didn't run across near as many bugs as I did in Spider-Man or Astro or Sackboy, all this other stuff. And anything I did see, I would attribute to the original design rather than anything technical they did. And it's clear that the render team at Blue Point is way better at this than From.
They really are. It's crazy.
Now I have to jump in here and talk about how that can only taking that whole original design philosophy can only defend them so much. Here's why.
You're right. Go ahead.
The moment you choose to put a thing like the Sodden Ring in the game, the moment you choose to put a thing that subverts the weight system, allowing you to transport items directly from where you're grabbing them to the blacksmith, the moment you choose to make improvements that vastly streamline horrible things from the original game is the moment that you invite the conversation. Why did you improve this thing but not the other things?
I agree about the weight system. The weight system is meaningless. In fact, I think it's funny that they added. Have you found the Ring of Uneven Scales yet? Do you know what that is?
No.
It increases the item limit, which is now meaningless.
Yes.
It lowers your equip limit, when really the opposite would be much more helpful. The Sodden Ring, I will disagree, because to get it is esoteric in the most Souls way imaginable. If they had if the entrance to the swamp had been like, hey, here's a ring just lying on the ground, then I'd say yeah, okay. But the weight system, they definitely broke it, and that does open the door for well, why not fix this instead? Namely the finite healing items, because Demon Souls is, and always will be the grindiest of the Souls games.
Right. That's the thing, is that you can say that that esoteric is in the nature of the Sodden Ring, but I would say that that's actually an element of Demon Souls that you should, of Dark Souls and from I would say that that's an element of Soulsborne games that you actually should keep intact.
Yes.
Being esoteric and having strange secrets. But the existence of these things that allows you to bypass annoying parts of the original game, that is the point where I say to you, okay, so you did this thing that allows me to send weighted equipment back to the blacksmith so I don't have to come back here later. Why do I still have to grind for anywhere from, at the beginning of the game, for 15 to 30 minutes at a time to get curatives back so I can go and continue progress in the game? Why don't you just make it so when I start the torch, I just have a minimum amount of herbs in my pocket that I can use at my will? Like
Bloodborne, right?
Like Bloodborne, or just make it so I don't have to continue to grind.
Except that Bloodborne didn't do that. What Bloodborne did was it looked in your stash, and if you had enough of an item to have the minimum number of curatives, you got them. If you did not, you had to grind.
Right. And there's a certain point where you can say, yes, there are design elements here that are just worth keeping intact to keep the spirit of the game intact. You know what's not one of those things? Being hit by the physics of an explosion through a wall.
That happens in all the Souls games, for better or worse.
I know,
worse.
But it's not some
worse. It's bad game design, and we can't give this an award.
I don't want it to win. I don't think it should.
Here's my argument.
Asif, actually, I'm going to argue to the better point, because you know what one of the ways to beat Maneater is? Let his limbs go through there's a torch in the area, and if his limbs go through it, you can swing on his limbs and hit him through the object.
No, I get it.
A lot of the arenas are designed intentionally. I think that would... So, Asif, that's always been a problem, and I don't like it. The thing is it works both ways. There is a spell late in the game that is actually designed in the description. Hey, cast this because it hits enemies through walls. You can use that, and you can use it to much better effect than any of the enemies can.
But physics. explosion happens on one side of a giant stone wall, and then you die.
I don't know how many video games you've played, but like real life physics do not often apply in video game land. But again, I'm saying it's a bad thing.
In a game that is so hell-bent on being real and tough.
It's not hell-bent on being real.
It's hell-bent on being
fair. But hang on, I think it is fair to say...
It's one thing to be tough, it's another thing to be unfair. And the game, due to just flaws in its design, are unfair. It's unfair at times.
I have seen the death videos that you've sent me, and like 9 out of 10 of those are your fault, man.
I haven't even... I was too furious to even save some of the other death videos.
But I think it is fair to say, and this isn't specific about this, but if you are a game that demands perfection from your players or they're going to be punished, then you better bring perfection to your design.
It doesn't demand
It doesn't demand perfection.
No, it doesn't.
From what I've seen, it is definitely more of a... I wouldn't say perfection,
it doesn't demand perfection.
Details.
It demands, and this is the weirdest feeling, because I fucking hate this game, but I can't stop playing it. It tapped into the same shit that I feel about a Mario Maker level that I hate. Like a David Craddock
It's a
Mario
design that demands that you look to yourself, or why am I digging this up, or what am I doing to cause this death? Not to say there aren't cheap cheese deaths that happens.
Right, but if it's
also
explodes on the other
memorization.
side of a wall, then what's the answer to that, Chris?
To me, it's a game of memorization. It's about knowing this person's coming from this angle, this person's coming from this angle. I can lunge forward here. If I lunge forward on these stairs, I'm gonna fall to my death because this game's stupid. But like, it is about trial and error, and so much of Mario Maker games or levels are like that too.
And we celebrate Mike Tyson's Punch Out for literally sticking to that design.
I was gonna say this. It calls back to NES era difficulty, and I respect it for that. But it's hard for me to look at it and just be like, oh yeah, this is fine.
Which is actually, I'm glad you mentioned this, because we played for Extra Life last year. We played Dark Souls Remastered. You took to that right away.
Mm-hmm.
The deaths and so forth didn't bother you as much, and I wondered why you thought that was. You thought it was because Dark Souls largely takes place inside, so you had more room to...
Yes, it's definitely a more open level design. I think there's things about being in very close hallways in Demon Souls that if you don't know what you're doing, you look like a fool. You hit your sword up against the wall. It's frustrating. I get it. But like at some point, it's not just frustrating. The lock-on mechanic is trash in that game. Like, I hate it. It leads me to so many mistakes. And like, we've had Z-targeting since '96.
I'm gonna be the Moon Man. I'm gonna be the Moon Man meme here and say always has been. But
always has been.
But
I did not know that Demon Souls had targeting until right now.
But
it does.
Chris.
But like
Exactly.
in the bluntest form of expression, From Software, Soulsborne games are not about being rising to a challenge. It's about out-cheesing the shit out of it because it will cheese the shit out of you.
Are you being tongue-in-cheek? Because I don't think that's true at all. Okay, I'll take that as yes.
No, I'm not being tongue-in-cheek because there are definitely like you learn the way that it works, for better or worse, through trial and error, and then you learn the ways that you can like manipulate it to your advantage.
Well, how is that different from most other games?
It's not.
But like,
that's not what I don't hold this against it at all. I think it's actually what makes the game really good and why I keep playing it. It's just I hate it.
like the thing I mentioned before about you can't swing your sword through objects, but enemies can, and you can use that to your advantage to hit their limbs when they swing through objects, and that works.
Yeah.
Sam,
I would have appreciated a more consistent, consistent gameplay across the entire game. Like if they spent the time actually fixing some of the jank in this game, it might have been like in my top 5 games of the year.
I can see that, and that's something Amy and I have talked a lot about. We've actually argued good-naturedly about. I don't like the changes to the inventory weight system. She actually does, and in fact, I brought up TJ's point. I'm like, well, if they change that, why not implement an Estus flask system so that you don't have to grind for curatives? And I actually think that would break the game in a way that the inventory weight system doesn't. I actually wanted to. What's that? She's cheating on me? That could be true. She's cheating on me with Dark Souls 2, so I don't even blame her. I wondered if Sam wanted to weigh in here, because Sam's another Soulsborne fan. And I don't think he's played the Demon Souls remake yet, but at the same time, he kind of has, since the code is basically the same as the PS3 version. And I wondered if he wanted to speak to Demon Souls at all.
Well, yeah, David's right insofar as I haven't had a chance to play the PlayStation 5 remake yet, but in terms of the remakes that we have here on our list to discuss, I propose that Demon Souls is by far the most important one, because it kicked off an entire genre of games that are still trying to emulate.
Yeah.
And it gives a whole generation a reason to go back and see where it all started.
That's actually,
and not only that, it's it looks better. So, visually, it's a stunning game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
I agree completely. It is the most beautiful game I've played on PS5.
But if your argument is influence and impact, Final Fantasy VII blows the Soulsborne genre out of the water. Frankly,
it's not going to. Oh, wow! I don't think that's true over the last 10 years. Final Fantasy hasn't been relevant for a long time, but I don't think Final Fantasy VII Remake will change things in the JRPG genre or the industry as a whole the way that Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 have.
No one says, is this a Final Fantasy-like game? It's no. Everyone says, is this a Souls-like?
Is this a Souls-like? That's nomenclature now. It's Doom clone, Diablo clone, Souls-like. That's a thing. And the thing I was telling Asif, Demon Souls went from a project that Sony said, fuck this game, I'm not even going to publish it in the West, lost those publishing rights to Dark Souls to now Bandai Namco, regretted it, and it has gone from the bastard stepchild to marquee AAA launch game on a new console, and arguably the best launch game so far this generation. That is the reason I dropped an exorbitant amount of money on a PS5 bundle. It is the reason.
It is the one game that sold you on the PS5. I remember that.
Yeah, it is the reason so many people are like, oh, fuck it, Demon Souls, I'm going PS5.
It's literally the only reason that I really want to get a PlayStation 5 is to play Demon Souls, despite the fact I've played it, 10 years ago now? 9 years ago?
11 years ago.
11, oh wow, that's right, 2009.
Because I remember so many people mourned the death of the servers, the PS3 servers.
Yep. Amy and I played together one last time. It was really sad. And
it was a cool moment. Everyone got together as the servers went offline. It was actually kind of neat.
Demon Souls was just this groundswell. It went from what is this Souls game to it's leading the launch lineup this console generation. It is the first must-play system-selling game.
Yeah. It's also a complete game. It's not part one.
Yeah, exactly. It's unlike Final Fantasy VII, this is done.
But do you know what remake this year isn't esoteric in its gameplay design and doesn't require you to buy a $400 console to play it?
Tell us, Josh.
I'm doing the Italian hand gesture right now. You just can't see it on camera.
Mafia Definitive Edition.
Mamma mia.
Yeah, talk to us about Mafia.
It is fantastic. To take a game from 2002, which was beloved, very beloved, and to capture it and keep there are parts of it that are the same. The story beats, the main story beats, it is very much the same, but the developers have taken the entire world and turned it the ways that they needed to, the world map and everything, to make it more enjoyable to drive in. It captures all of the arcadey aspects of the newer Mafia games, like Mafia 3, which included more arcadey driving, and also includes the simulation stuff that all of the OG Mafia fans know and love, like having to make sure you have enough gas in your car because somebody wants that in a video game. But the option's there if you want it. But But I mean, the story is amazing. There's no replayability, none at all, unless you just really like the story like I do. But, you know, if you want a great remake of a great game made even better, where they explore the characters more in depth as well, similar to what they did in Final Fantasy, like characters that were just kind of there, that were just kind of set pieces, now have more story and more background, and like you care about them more. Like they do all of that really well with some of the key characters in the main character's story. And it's just great. If you like true crime stuff, if you like mafia type stuff, like it's a fantastic remake.
And it's on Switch, right?
No, it's not on Switch.
None of these games are on Switch.
It also looks better than all the other remakes this year. The graphics are just outstanding.
The graphics in Mafia are great.
Wait,
the
so better than Demon's Souls?
Yes, it looks a lot better than Demon's Souls.
Wow.
Nothing against Demon's Souls, but Demon's Souls is like what I thought a PS4 game should run like when they came out. I mean, I love it. I love that it's at 60 hertz, but it is not a looker. I mean, it is compared to the other From games just because those people are not good at making games that look good. But
okay.
I haven't played Mafia on the console, so I'm not sure how it looks on there. But on the Epic Game Store version, it is wowzers.
Yeah, I played it on PC too. That game is pretty damn good.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's so well done.
They changed the gunplay, they changed the driving, they changed the hand-to-hand stuff, the movements. I mean, it's not like unlike Demon's Souls, although Demon's Souls is weird in that the remake used the original code morphed in with whatever they did with the renderer. This is like, you know, from ground up or whatever. But there's a lot of the weird stuff that's just 2002 drawbacks. I don't know the words I'm looking for. There's certain ways that games work back then due to tech or whatever else. And a lot of that stuff has been changed in the remake just for modern sensibilities or whatever, which is always appreciated. Even though, like Josh said, the main story beat remains the same. Just about everything else has been massaged up into perfectly, you know, like had there not been an original game and there's no before and this came out, this would still count as a AAA. Like this should be turning more heads than it did when it came out, which I'm kind of surprised that Take-Two bunged it up and kind of let this one slide under the radar.
That's why Josh nominated for Overlooked Game of the Year as well.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything about it is so well done. From
I'm
the setting,
shocked it's not on the new consoles.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised. It would have been a really good push for those, I think. But I mean, it's everything about it's great. Like the character models are great. The world itself is amazing. Like the city is beautiful as you drive through it. Like the amount of detail in the old cars is just astounding. Like it captures the feeling of that time period perfectly, and it captures like the obviously like the story is still following those same beats, but like they expand on the characters more to kind of really dig deeper into that process of going from a happy-go-lucky cab driver to a made man, you know, in over his head. Like it's your typical mob story. Sure, you know, we've seen this play out a thousand times in mafiosa content, but like they do it so well, and being like a part of it as playing the character, like it just all works out so well and it feels really good. And it's honestly, it's the best game, one of the best games I've played this year, honestly.
Nice. Well, I think we've reached a point where we could probably vote, right?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other games they want to nominate?
What a stacked category this is. This is really tough.
I want to say that Josh and Chris have me looking at Mafia Definitive Edition. I'm definitely going to play that. There were screenshots. I did a double take. I thought it was a still from a movie. Like,
yeah, this is on Epic Game Store.
It's on Steam too.
Yeah, it is on Steam. I believe that Uncle Nick gifted me a copy and so I didn't buy it.
Yeah, I think I'll probably just download it on Epic Game Store.
It's one of the few games I bought for myself this year.
I like the original games, so everything you're saying, Josh, I'm interested in.
I have read though that the console versions are 20 FPS slideshow. So
yeah, I don't think it's very good on console, but I mean there's so many games that aren't good on the last gen of consoles.
Yeah, I mean this is the last year of the generation.
Non-accelerated ray tracing, so I think that was just something the PS4 and Xbox couldn't do without Shogun.
Yep. Okay, let's get some votes in. Greg.
Final Fantasy 7 Remake.
FF7. Ozzy.
I'm gonna say Final Fantasy VII with the caveat that you should play all of these games.
Yeah, they're all excellent games. I'm really happy that all these games were remade, and some of them were a surprise. Like, I don't think we didn't know Tony Hawk was coming out this year.
Like, Final Fantasy VII did not win as much, but like it went close.
Yeah.
It went really close over Resident Evil, over Tony Hawk, over Mafia. Like, go play all these games.
David,
Resident Evil 3.
RE3 remake. Steve,
Final Fantasy VII.
F7. Blake,
Final Fantasy 7.
Sam,
Demon Souls.
Chris,
Mafia.
TJ.
Tony Hawk.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater, my man.
Yeah, there was a reason why I went with Tony Hawk, and it was more than just the graphics. I actually do want to put that out there. Tony Hawk was a super important game for me and my spouse this year because for one, I love the new music that they added. Like some of those new tracks they added in addition to the old stuff is really great.
Mm-hmm.
For two, the new skaters was like the
Oh yeah, they added Leo Baker.
Leo Baker, who, when's the last time you saw a non-binary character in a game that you could literally just like play the whole game with that character as the protagonist?
Yeah, and like back in the day, putting Alyssa Steamer in the game was a big deal too, like having a female skater being represented. But yeah, that was a huge deal.
So, and then they actually did like advertising with Leo Baker in the videos. So, I enjoyed Tony Hawk Pro Skater probably the most out of any of the remakes I played this year, but also like on a personal level, that was a really important game for me.
Nice. I absolutely love the game. Donovan. You gonna stab David in the back again?
No, I'm actually gonna go with RE3.
Oh, wow.
I think RE3 is probably my favorite remake this year.
What? Oh, I feel like that's a guilt vote. But
I didn't like Demon Souls. I played it for a few hours, and then I got into Final Fantasy. So.
Oh no.
You bought
the game like what, yesterday?
Yeah,
I saw you post about it. Like,
I played 2 hours. I played enough of that game. I didn't beat the first boss.
You like Mark Cubaned it. You're like,
you didn't beat the Phalanx?
I probably won't.
I'm at the Phalanx right now.
Back to him.
I want to say this, Asif, you are better at that game on your first time playing it than I was. That first level, because I started as the fucking barbarian with a loincloth and a stick, took me 9 hours, and you got to Phalanx like a long time before.
Solitaria Paris 1-1.
I'm not the worst at video games or anything.
No, I'm not saying that.
Times, like I'll get good at something, but I have this weird. I'm gonna beat that game.
I know you are.
Like, there's something about it that like it's tapped into like that competitive nature I have, where it's not about beating it's another person. It's not about an online competitive game. It's not like Rocket League or something. But like, I want to beat that game, like just for myself.
Yeah, but you don't want to beat it because you're having fun. You want to beat it out of spite.
No, at some point, this is going to turn into like a love-hate.
It is.
I see it coming because like the repetition. It's a game of repetition. But Bill, what is your vote?
Bill's had to step away just for 10 minutes. He might be back in a few minutes.
Oh, this is a crucial vote.
Oh, he voted for Demon Souls.
He did?
He told me to say that, yeah. I was thinking about just saying Final Fantasy VII, but I'm going to respect Bill and actually...
Okay. Josh, you're voting for Mafia, right?
100%. I don't know. Final Fantasy VII Remake was good, but I just didn't... I don't know. It didn't hit me the way that it hit others, and I'm glad that it hit you guys that way. But I didn't really enjoy it all that much. So,
I think it's a very good game, but it's not my favorite remake this year. That's gonna go to Tony Hawk.
I think that's fair.
I just hours played. Like, you know how everyone here has had to review a game. You know how much time you put into a review game. Usually, when you're done reviewing the game, you're done. Right? Like, you're not, I'm going to spend another 100 hours in this game. This was like, I 100%ed every single character in the game, except for Chad Muska, because screw that guy. No, I'll get to Chad Muska one of these days. Okay, so let's look at the votes. With 2 votes, we have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. Also with 2 votes, we have with 1 vote, 2 votes, we have RE3. 2 votes for Demon's Souls. 2 votes for Mafia. And 1, 2, 3, 4 votes for Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII Remake is your best remake of 2020 here at Shacknews.